All right, I had to make this video today because too many things were showing up in my life that were pointing to this dragon of resistance. So this video is going to be about the dragon of rationalization. And the dragon of rationalization is basically something that the mind does. So we have to understand how the mind works. So we are not our minds. Our mind is part of us, but we are not our minds, and we can tap into the truth through our heart. And the heart receives information and will connect the truth with you before the mind has any clue. Actually, the mind doesn't even connect with truth. So I've been reading this book, Untethered Soul, and this came up this morning, and then other things happened today where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm rationalizing and I know I need to get this done. So I thought, oh my gosh, rationalization is a dragon of resistance. So I want to share with you what I read in this book, and then I'll talk about the other points around rationalization and how it shows up in your life. But this is really powerful stuff. So if you understand how the mind works, you can really take back complete control of your life, and you can choose joy and productivity and all the great things that you want to choose for your life. So this is Untethered Soul, page 95. So say something happens, you get triggered, and your mind starts to race. And sometimes, and this has happened to me in the past, my mind would race and I would give energy to it, and I would try to figure things out and solve problems, and it would actually weigh me down sometimes for a few days. And I would stay in this vortex of negative energy, negative mental chatter. I didn't know that I can actually be the observer of the mind, and if it wants to go down that path, I can choose to let it go. So I want to read this, page 95, Untethered Soul. The key is to be quiet. It's not that your mind has to be quiet. You be quiet. You, the one inside watching the neurotic mind. Just relax. You will then naturally fall behind the mind because you've always been there. You are not the thinking mind. You are aware of the thinking mind. You are the consciousness that is behind the mind and is aware of the thoughts. The minute you stop putting your whole heart and soul into the mind as if it were your savior and protector, you will find yourself behind the mind, watching it. That's how you know about your thoughts. You are there watching them. My oven's ready. Eventually, you'll be able to just sit in there quietly and consciously watch the mind. Once you reach that state, your problems with the mind are over. You will pull back behind the mind. You, the awareness, are not involved in the process of thinking. Thinking is something you watch the mind do. You are just in there, aware that you are aware. You are the indwelling being, the consciousness. It is not something that you have to think about. You are it. You can watch the mind be neurotic and not get involved. That is all you have to do to unplug the disturbed mind. The mind runs because you are giving it the power of your attention. Withdraw your attention and the thinking mind falls away. So there's so much good stuff in this book. I wish I would have read this when I was really young, and then I could have caught myself instead of getting into these mental loops. And sometimes these mental loops can turn into behavior. So I'm going to do a video about this sometime called the trivium, the thoughts, emotions, and actions trivium. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's important to understand you can observe your thoughts. You can also observe your emotions. But first comes the thoughts. So that's important. And with the topic of rationalization, this is a dragon of resistance because it's a mental virus that we create to rationalize not doing what we know we need to do. I call them sweet little lies we tell ourselves. Now, I have completely done this many times in my life. It's basically where you tell yourself, I'm not going to do this thing that I know I need to do because this thing is so good and so important. I'm going to do this instead. But if you were to pull back in contemplation, you would realize that was a sweet little lie you told yourself, and you know what you need to do. Another part of rationalization is the truth isn't that important. So you're going about your life, maybe you're distracted and busy and you're telling yourself sweet little lies, and the truth keeps trying to knock at you, you know, knocking on the door. That's your heart. Your heart is connected to the truth, connected to God, to divinity. And your heart keeps telling you one thing, but you just don't want to hear it. So you're obviously not caring enough about the truth, and you don't think that it is important. So be conscious that you want to connect with the truth, and it will be easier for you to connect with it, even though it's hard sometimes. I wanted to talk a little bit about contemplation. There is an amazing book by Richard Rudd. He's the creator of the Gene Keys. I'm looking over here because... Dang it. Oh, it's in my other room. It's such a good book. It's called The Art of Contemplation. If I were to be on an island and have one book, that's the one I would have. Well, I'd probably have the Gene Keys because that book is really big and fat, and it would give me a lot of stuff to think about. But The Art of Contemplation is a life-altering book, similar to how this one helps you understand the mind. But basically, it's not about concentration. It's not about meditation. This is about contemplation. Contemplation is where you take a thought or a question or something that you want to figure out, and you go into a peaceful place and allow yourself to receive the answer. I love how Richard Rudd describes it. Maybe you're blindfolded and you're holding a ring box, you know, like a jewelry ring box. And you play with it in your hands, you move it around, and you're like, oh, okay, it feels kind of like a cube shape. It's soft. But then all of a sudden, you can click a button and it pops open. Like, it completely transforms. And I love that as a metaphor for contemplation. Contemplation is similar to holding a box or holding an idea or holding a question, playing with it in your hands, exploring it, feeling it, smelling it, all of that. And all of a sudden something happens, and an epiphany or some sort of awakening around this question will fall into your awareness, just like this beautiful gift from the heavens, right? So with contemplation, you can go into a state and you can actually invite that epiphany, invite that awareness. And you don't always get it right away. You don't always get it while you're sitting there in contemplation. But when you set that intention, it will be revealed to you. For me, it's always within I'd say the most I've waited is like 48 hours. So it'll be revealed to you. So contemplation's amazing. Read that book, The Art of Contemplation. If we are rationalizing and coming up with these pretty little lies that we tell ourselves in order to avoid doing what we know we need to do, and you can feel the energy, you can feel the discord, then I invite you to go into contemplation and to find the truth in what it is that you know you need to do. So that's how contemplation relates to rationalizations. Also, rationalizations remind me of what we want versus what is. So again, it can be really confusing being in this world, going about life and having all these wants and desires come up. And a lot of times they are completely out of alignment with what is. So this is about committing to be loyal to truth. Regardless of what we want, regardless of our desires, what is true and what is right and what is the next inspired action. I am no longer going to rationalize my way out of avoiding the truth and what I should truly do. Another part of rationalization is we have to see how we're setting the bar low for our goals in life. So we are like, you know what? At least I'm not that guy, or at least I'm not that. You know, I'm better than that, so I feel pretty good, so I'm going to go watch Netflix. Well, that's rationalization. Just because your bar is set so low doesn't mean that you should settle into operating at that low level. You're rationalizing away what you know you should do. Another way the dragon of rationalization shows up in your life is you have to acknowledge that if you are rationalizing not doing something, then you don't care about that thing. You don't care. If you've come up with a story, a sweet, pretty little lie that you've told yourself to avoid doing something, well, that's something that you know you should do. You don't care about it that much. I like this realization because what if that thing that you're not doing is something that your heart and soul knows you should care about that? It might be something you're growing or nurturing. So that's a tough one to face. To me, that's shadow work. That's going into a shadow. There's an aspect of you that doesn't care. If you're letting your plants die because you have all these other important things to do, you have to admit you don't really care about your plant. Maybe that's hard to admit because you love your plant. And I'm using plant as a pretty easy example. What if I was talking about your pet or your children or your health or your finances? If you're rationalizing, not giving attention to those things, you got to admit that you don't care. And if part of you knows you do care, then shift it, stop rationalizing, and take right action. So have courage and acknowledge that you have a dragon of rationalization. Have the courage to face the truth of why you're lying to yourself. Overcome it, bridge that gap with courage, bridge that gap with connecting with your heart, being the observer of the mind, and take right action.